Hello, everybody. All right, so we have a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to do it in. So, excuse my dog Elliot. He's my Chihuahua. He is loud and obnoxious. I am going to push through as much as I can. So, looking at the anatomy of the heart, we're going to skip over chapter 10 temporarily and looking at the blood, and we're going to look first at how the blood is pumped through the system. Your heart is a closed chamber pump that allows blood to circulate through all parts of the body. It is what delivers the oxygen and the nutrients to the cells and tissues of where it needs to go. It also allows for carbon dioxide and wastes to be removed from these same cells and tissues. It doesn't do the filtration. It doesn't actually move the oxygen from the blood to the cells. It simply transports it. So it's like the trucks on the highway bringing food to the grocery stores. All right, it's located in your chest or in your thorax. It's in between your lungs. Sorry about that. My one dog figured out how to open up my door. She was so upset that I separated myself from her. So let's talk about the location. It's located in your thorax, in between your lungs, the right and left lobe of the lungs. Its apex, or the tip of it, is actually down. It's opposite to what you would think. So its apex points down towards your left hip, and its base points upward towards your right shoulder. So it sits kitty corner across your chest, between the right and left lobes of your lungs, and it is about the size of your fist. So if you look at it, your lungs are right here. This is where your heart, the apex is on the bottom, and the base is at the top. The base essentially is where all of your large veins and arteries attach to the heart. Here's another image of it behind the sternum. Here's a cross cut of the body. So your mediastinum is right here. Lung, ooh, wrong one, sorry. Lung, and then your heart in between. These are your large blood vessels. So this is your esophagus, and then these are your blood vessels. This is your aorta, and this is a pulmonary vein. All right, so your heart sits in a sac. It's a sac within your body that has layers to it. The first outermost layer is your fibrous pericardium. So the first layer, or the outside layer, is your pericardium. The pericardium is the actual sac. It's double-walled. You've got your fibrous pericardium that's loose and it's superficial. And this here is your fibrous pericardium. Okay. Under that, you've got your serous membrane, which has two layers to it. And in between this membrane is serous fluid. So again, here is your fibrous pericardium. And then here is your serous pericardium. This is your parietal layer, which sits just underneath the fibrous layer. And then you've got your epicardium, which is the visceral layer of the serous pericardium. 3 layers: fibrous, parietal layer of the serous pericardium, visceral layer of the serous pericardium. In this space here, you have serous fluid. That fluid allows for cushioning. It also allows for lubrication for the heart to move against other tissues without damaging itself. Moving on, there's 3 layers of the heart wall. You've got your epicardium, your myocardium, and your endocardium. The epicardium, epic, it's on the outside, it's big, it's your outside layer. This layer is the same thing as your visceral pericardium. So your epicardium, the outside layer of your heart, is actually a part of the pericardium. It's your visceral layer of the serous pericardium. They are one and the same. You've got your myocardium. Your myocardium is the middle layer. Myo means muscle. Remember, So you've got your myocardium, which is mainly muscle, and that is the middle layer. And then you've got your endocardium. Your endocardium here is the inside layer of your heart. It's also known as the endothelium, but it is what lines your heart chambers. Okay, let's go. Been there, done that. All right, so let's talk about the chambers of the heart. They go from the right side and the left side. So you've got your ventricles and you've got your atrium right here. Okay, you've got your right atrium, which the atrium receives the blood into the heart. Much like you would walk into an atrium as you're walking into a mall, the blood goes into the atria as it comes into the heart. It moves then from the atrium into the ventricle. The ventricle is where it's pushed out of the heart. So you have your right ventricle and your left ventricle. You can see a big difference between the walls, the muscular walls of the two ventricles. You have your right atrium and your left atrium. Now that you've had a peek of this one, here's a cross section. There's your left ventricle here, your right ventricle. Your left ventricle is so thick because that is the ventricle that's pushing the blood out to circulate around your whole body. Your right ventricle doesn't have to go so far. It's pushing the blood out, but it's pushing the blood out to the lungs, so the distance is not as great. So in looking at this, you've got separations between the ventricles and the atria. Here is your intraventricular septum right here. That's the wall between the two ventricles. You've got an interatrial septum that separates the two atria. And then you've got the atrioventricular septum, which separates the atrium and the ventricles from each other. Let's talk about the different types of circulation. So you've got your left ventricle, which pushes blood out to the rest of the body. The rest of the body, it flows through and then it comes back by the vena cavas. So it leaves to go to the body through the left ventricle, goes out to the body, and when it comes back into the right atrium, which then travels down into the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle, it's pushed out into the lungs. Once it goes into the lungs, it then comes back in to the left atrium. These are your pulmonary veins. Veins are labeled going into the heart. Arteries are labeled to go out from the heart. Okay, but there's a difference here. Here you've got the difference between the oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood. So when you've got the veins, pulmonary veins coming back into the heart, they actually are labeled as red here because they're oxygenated blood coming back in from the lungs. Whereas if you look at the pulmonary artery, it's blue because it's deoxygenated. And then looking at the vena cava, here's your inferior vena cava, your superior vena cava. They are blue as well because they're deoxygenated. And then your aorta, which comes out of the left ventricle, that's oxygenated blood. So that's the color differences that you're going to see. Remembering that your pulmonary veins are opposite and your pulmonary veins are oxygenated blood, not deoxygenated blood. All right, let's look at the chambers that are associated and the great vessels. So your blood flows, and we've been through this, your blood flows from your, let's see where they start this from, systemic circulation from the left side of the heart. Okay, so we're going to start with the left ventricle. Left ventricle is the most muscular side of the heart. It is going to push the oxygenated blood up through the aorta, out to the rest of the body, carrying this oxygenated blood out to the tissues. It's oxygen rich, and then as it comes back in, up through the vena cava, it's deoxygenated. So it's blood that has more carbon dioxide in it. It comes in through the right atrium, passes through to the right ventricle, and then goes and is pumped out to the heart through the pulmonary arteries to become reoxygenated, and then back in through the heart to the left atria, into the left ventricle, and back around. And that is your circulation. Really quite simple. Now, when you're looking at how the heart pumps, as with any pump, you're going to need to have something that's going to prevent backflow. And that's what your valves do within your heart. It prevents backflow, so it allows the blood to only travel in one direction.